Good morning, and
Morning.
welcome to the University Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. My name is Bethard Keeper, and I'll be your service leader today. Before we start our service, we'll have an update from our chairpersons for committee moments. Please raise your hands, and Martha Kirby will call on you for your announcements.
I'm looking for David McElroy. I see you first.
All right. Hi, everybody. Tomorrow night at 7 is the Men's Support Group Zoom meeting. I sent out a notice to everybody, so hopefully we will see some of the men tomorrow. We've had a pretty good turnout lately, and hopefully everybody can show up and we'll have a good chat. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Let's see, John Mowbray. Sorry, he raised his virtual hand. I happened to get a note.
Right. Good morning, everybody. Just want to remind you all that this coming Saturday will be work day at the church from about 9 to 12, as much time as you can spare. I will not be there, but there will be other folks from the Facilities and Grounds Committee that will be there, and will direct you on what you can do, or you can just make up whatever you'd like to do. So we'd appreciate the help. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Yeah, you did some wonderful work yesterday on the Memorial Garden. It's really beautiful. Chris.
Okay. I also wanted to acknowledge that John was there all day Friday working and did incredible work. So he puts in lots of hours that most people don't know about. And I just wanted to thank him for that. And thank everyone for, we had a great open air movie night last night with the youth group, and it was just hysterical and fun, and it worked really well. We projected outside on the storage shed, and it worked just really great. So
cool.
Yeah, it was really great. So thank you to everyone who helped make that happen.
That's awesome. Yes, and thank you, John. I knew he was there all day Friday, and I saw a picture. It looks really beautiful, really beautiful. Crystal, I see your hand up.
Good morning, everyone. Just, the regular reminder that this parent support group is still going on 9 p.m. on Sunday nights. I just threw the Zoom ID number into the chat. If anybody would like to join us, we are always open to new or returning faces. So
thank you. Judith.
Thank you for not missing me, because I forgot to put my hand up. Yes, so regarding religious education, there are a few things parents need to know. Next week, the 21st, we are meeting on the property at 9:30 in the morning, so that so the kids can have their time. We have staff, and then you can listen to the service online. We have an internet connection at the church, so bring your laptops. Plus, I'll have mine out for you, so you can gather around from a distance and see what's going on. The 28th in the classroom, we have a visitor. All are welcome. We have Quaker visitors coming to the RE classroom online in the Zoom room on the 28th. And on April 4th, it's Easter Sunday. We have, again, at 9:30 in the morning, we have Easter dragon egg hunt, which is a carefully planned, socially distanced egg hunt, and the egg drop for the kids, which is a STEM project, basically. So kids and families are welcome at 9:30 on the 21st and the 4th on the church property. Wear your masks. Instructions will go out in the next week.
Cool. I think I've saved the best for last. That would be Mary Ann. I don't see any other hands raised. Maybe not the best, but close to my heart. Miss Mary Ann.
Thank you, Martha. So from the Social Action Committee, first a report from the Legislative Ministry. This week, House Bill 1, which is the Combating Disorder and Violence bill, is going to the House floor. So we encourage you strongly to call or text or send an email to your representative in the Florida House. This bill is especially egregious. First of all, it puts a penalty of a felony offense for anyone who participates in a demonstration that turns violent. So you could be a silent observer and be charged with a felony. Second, it takes away and waives any penalty for someone who would drive into a crowd of demonstrators. Third, it takes away the ability of local governments to manage their budget and how they would address any kind of demonstration or protest. So those are the three top reasons it is so egregious, but there are many others. It's very vague, which allows for all kinds of interpretation. And the state is really taking away local power on how to handle demonstrations, protests, marches, those types of things. So please do call, text, message. As I said, the vote goes this week. It's one of the first bills to be voted on, and it's one of the most important ones. So with that, I'll turn it over to Martha, who's going to talk about Social Action Committee's Boots on the Ground, our speaker today for Social Action Sunday. And away, Martha.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Thank you. I know I'll definitely be calling and emailing and whatever else we can do, because that really is one of the worst that's up there. You'll be hearing more today from Eric Gray, the new executive director of the Christian Service Center. We have 2 boots on the ground opportunities set up so far on March 25th and 26th. I believe the information was in the notable news, and we will be repeating it next week, but it'll be a little too late. So get a hold of me. We'll may even send out a separate email for that for the 25th and 26th. Now we do have one more week. I'm sorry. This time change has got me a little off kilter this morning. But there's an opportunity to prepare the meal and serve the meal at the Christian Service Center downtown, which they've been doing daily for over 50 years. And I hope that you will consider joining in. There's only a few spots, where at Second Harvest we had 10. Christian Service Center is not quite as space rich, so to say, but there are 5 or 6 slots each day. And I hope you will join me in getting connected with this important work in downtown Orlando and how we can help further address our issues of homelessness, housing insecurity, and food insecurity, and get to know some new neighbors. So I look forward to you joining me. Just believe I put my number on the announcement. So email or call or text or send a carrier pigeon and I will get your name on the list. So far, I have 3 people that have signed up with me and I'm really looking forward to it. So I think that's it. I'll take one last look. I don't see any virtual hands raised or regular hands raised. So I think we're done announcing all that's going on. Back to you, Beth.
Thank you, Martha. My call to community today are mainly from the words of the Reverend Elizabeth Nugent, who is a Unitarian Universalist minister. She doesn't belong to us. No. All right. We move mountains one stone at a time. As Unitarian Universalists, our journey is to transform the big and the small, to transform ourselves and to transform the world. Universalism means no one is outside of the circle of love and no one is disposable. We stubbornly seek out the spark of the divine in each other, no matter what. Interdependence means none of us is truly free until we are all free, and our thriving is bound up in the earth's thriving. We struggle for liberation from the violence of racism, white supremacy, sexism, ableism, classism, and heterosexism. Our covenants mean we make promises to our communities to honor love and justice above all. Thank you. Our musical interlude, Lifted in Love, was written by Carl Karush and Lee Morris and performed by Lee Morris.
We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the birds, they tell us. We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the trees, they tell us. We're here to be lifted in love, to listen to love as a flower raises its face to the sun. We are all one, here to be lifted in grace and love. We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the sky, it tells us. We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the trees, they tell us. We're here to be lifted in love, to listen to love as the children raise all their faces to the sun. We are all one, here to be lifted in grace and love. We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the trees, they tell us. We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the seas, they tell us. We're here to be lifted in love, to listen to love as the flower raises its face to the sun. We are all one, here to be lifted in grace and love.
It's a tradition in most Unitarian Universalist churches that we open our services with the lighting of the chalice. Please, if you have a chalice handy, please take hold of it and join me in the lighting. Let me think. I have new matches too. Please repeat these words with me. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Now, please give voice to our affirmation in unison and think of the words as we say them. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its gift. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth and love, and to help one another. Now let's take a minute to just meditate on these words. We'll now share our joys and concerns with each other. By sharing our joys, we hope to bring joy to others. By sharing our concerns, we help to lift the burdens you carry at this time. Please raise your hand and Amanda Major will
some messages in the chat wishing Paul. If no other joys or concerns, right? Thank you to each of you for sharing. Let us lift up what was spoken. Let us lift up what was unspoken in the light of love. And I'd like to acknowledge the anniversary, of having remote services due to the COVID crisis. So it'll be a year now that we've been having remote services. Let us take a full minute to reflect on this in silence, as well as the joys and concerns, heard or unheard, to just release your thoughts associated with this benchmark, feelings of grief, gratitude, whatever comes up for you. Let's hold it there in silence for a full minute. Thank you.
At this time, we connect with all ages. Time for All Ages is sponsored by our RE director, Judith Stein Farrell. Judith, what do you have for us today?
Thank you, Beth. That was really nice. Well, I have a story that several people are going to help with this morning. Before I give the intro to it, I'm going to give a quick suggestion lesson in case people haven't figured this out yet. It might be fun, and I'm not going to set it up so it happens automatically, but if you want to see each speaker as they come up specifically, you might click on the view button at the top right of most screens and click to speaker view. And then as a different speaker starts talking, their face will be primary in front of you. And you can always change it back to grid view later or gallery view later. Or you can leave it like this in a gallery view so you see everybody at once, but it might be fun. So Chris Reed read this story that we're about to hear to the congregation as we made an abrupt pivot last year to the online model, exactly 1 year ago this weekend. We didn't know how long we were going to be online, and no one knew what we were to expect. And here we are. This story reflects how many of us this story reflects how many of us have experienced this year and our hope for the future. It's a very seventh principle, the interdependent web of existence of which we are all a part kind of year. Several of our members are taking part in this story reading. The story is The Rhino Who Swallowed the Storm, a Storm. It was written by and created by LeVar Burton, Susan Schaefer, Bernardo, and Courtney Fletcher. There are no pictures going along with this, just the people speaking. So listen close, imagine the story in your mind's eye, and take it away, group. And take up and unmute first, Chris.
Unmute yourself, Chris.
I just did. I can't believe it's been a year. This is just unbelievable. But I remember us all sitting in front of the computer thinking, we don't know what we're doing. We're going to do the best we can. We want to reach out and let everyone know we're still here. And so it is amazing to commemorate this year gone by. Here we go. In the middle of the morning, Micah Mouse trembled under her blanket. A storm boomed outside her window. Rain crashed against the glass. Wind rattled the shutters. More than anything else, Micah was afraid of storms. A year before, a powerful hurricane had destroyed her home. "I'm scared, Papa," she said.
We are safe, Micah. This storm will pass soon, said Papa. Would you like me to read you a story? I know just the one to help you feel better. Micah loved books, and Papa's gentle voice soothed in a way that made her forget all about the thunder. Papa opened the book and began. Paula.
Paula.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize I missed that one. No, I can't do two screens at once, so I transcribed this thing and somehow I missed this one. So I think my paper thinks I'm not there until after David talks.
Okay, long ago, before there were, do you have that one? Long ago? Okay, long ago, before there were words, animals roamed in bountiful herds. Little rhinoceros, thank you, lived happy and free, exploring mountains and meadows, rivers and trees. His world was delightful and chock full of magic, until out of the blue, the magic turned tragic.
A storm swept through the valley, turning bright sky to black. A flash flood came raging, no time to react. Lost to the thundering, no time for wondering. Chaos and lightning, fury so frightening. Earth quaking, him shaking. Water rumbling, him tumbling. Raggedy, jaggedy, senseless calamity. The storm crashed through the world and tore it apart and took away everything dear to his heart.
Rhino was stunned by the terrible scene. Death and destruction all through the ravine. Enraged by the pain of such a great loss, Rhino acted without a thought to the cost. Rhino looked at the world, all tattered and torn, stood out on the ledge and swallowed the storm.
Inside his belly, he felt the storm growing. Inside his head, he heard howling and blowing. Like a tornado, he spun as the storm raged inside, growing bigger and bigger and wider than wide. When he finally stopped, when he regained control, he was at the very bottom of a very deep hole. What to do? Rhino worried as rain dripped down his face. I'm lost and I'm lonely and in such a dark place.
At just the right moment, to comfort and guide him, a spider dropped down and dangled beside him. The world up above is shattered and gray, but it's where you belong, and you must find a way to let the storm out and move through your sorrow. You will find many helpers on your road to tomorrow.
Oh, but that hole was dreadfully deep, and all the walls around him were slippery steep. Rhino tried to climb out, but was losing all hope when Kangaroo heard him and threw down a rope.
Oh, Rhino was heavy from the weight of the storm. They towed him right up, got him safe, dry and warm. We are strong and steady and always ready. When danger strikes, we hop to it. Fire or flood, snow or mud, when help is needed, we'll pull you through it. Watching those heroes do what they did best gave Rhino the strength to set off on his quest.
That storm he was clutching made him buzzy and blurry. It kept his brain foggy and filled him with fury. Where will I go? What will I do? How will I ever make it through?
After every dark night, there comes a new day. Be kind, do your best, and you'll find your way. Up comes the sun. There are steps to complete. There isn't a map. Just follow your feet.
Rhino followed his feet to a wallowing spot where he plopped on a rock and had a deep thought. I'm tired of caging the wind and the rain, exhausted from holding this anger and pain.
We're all on this earth to learn and to grow, a wise old tortoise chimed in from below. Allowing yourself to start feeling your feelings is the very first step on the journey towards healing. It doesn't much matter if you're fast or you're slow. If you want to move forward, just trust and let go.
Rhino shook and shimmered and stomped in the muck, and just as he hoped, that storm came unstuck. At first, one little raindrop leaked out of his eye. Then Rhino let go and had a good cry. His tears formed a river that flowed to the sea, where a pod of whales swam, so happy and free. I do feel better, Rhino thought as he drifted. Then up swam a whale, and Rhino was lifted.
If you ever feel blue, the whale said with a spout, remember to breathe. Breathe in and breathe out. Sing your own song and take it deep, deep, deep. Then rise above with a joyful leap.
As he floated home on a gentle wave, Rhino felt calm and strong and brave. His vision was clear like the sky above, and he looked at the world through eyes filled with love. He thanked the kind spider and the brave kangaroo and all the others who helped him through. He was glad to know if he ever lost hope, they'd lend him a hand and throw him a rope.
He had journeyed his journey a very long way to find the light in a world turned gray. He'd swallowed a storm with no thought to the cost. He'd felt all alone. He'd been tumbled and tossed.
Life would bring changes, beginnings and ends, but he had faith in himself and faith in his friends. And as they curled up together, he felt loved and protected and dreamed of a world that was safe and connected. He understood now it was love that mattered. Love could never be lost. Love could never be shattered.
Papa closed the book and gave Micah a hug. I know it was scary when our home was destroyed last winter, said Papa. Bad things happen sometimes, and we can't always control that.
But we had lots of helpers, said Micah, just like Rhino did.
That's right, little one, Papa said in his gentle way. You're never really alone when bad things happen. There are family and friends, even people we don't know, who are always there to help us through tough times.
Thank you. Thank you all. Back to you, Beth.
We have a tradition in the Unitarian Universalist Church, our Unitarian Universalist Church, in sharing our offerings, and we call it Share the Plate. March and April, Share the Plate, will be going to the Christian Service Center. Representative Eric is our speaker today. And so it's on the screen that we share 40% of the loose plate offering. And just follow the prompts on the screen. You can send in a check, or you can drop it off or donate any way you find reasonable. Thank you. Thank you. Our speaker today, Eric Gray, is Executive Director of the Christian Service Center located in downtown Orlando, CSC. Their important mission is to provide direct assistance to serve low income and underserved people in need of community to end homelessness. Mr. Frey?
Well, thank you for having me. Just from experience, can I get a thumbs up, make sure everybody can hear me so I don't spend the next half hour speaking to my empty screen? Thank you. Okay. So let me just start off. Thank you again for having me and for the generous offering. It's a pleasure to be here. Martha had a chance to come out and visit with us a couple weeks ago, and I've been working with my friend Dr. Feldheim for many years now, about 15 years in her work at the university, and she has served as a volunteer for multiple organizations that I've been a part of. So it's great to see some friendly faces here on a Sunday morning. I want to start off with a quote that I usually start off with most of my talks from Dr. King, who in one of his speeches at Stanford University in the last year of his life said at the beginning of his talk, "There are so many problems facing our nation and our world that one could just take off anywhere. But today I would like to talk mainly about poverty." And that's what I'm going to talk about today, is about poverty. I'll share a little bit about what's going on at the Christian Service Center, but mostly I want to just share what's going on here in Orlando. And I want to kind of start with some numbers. And if you have a pen and a piece of paper, a scratch piece of paper, you may want to, for the second set of numbers that I go through, follow along, because it'll be a little bit more difficult because the numbers get really specific. But I think if you have a pen and a piece of paper, you may want to grab it. So with the numbers, one of the things to keep in mind is that about 1 in 50 of our friends and neighbors here in the Orlando area are living in what's called extreme poverty, living on less than $2 a day. And whether you're in Omaha, Nebraska, or Opelika, Alabama, or Orlando, Florida, or Bangladesh, extreme poverty is a global definition of living on less than $2 a day. And right now, about 1 in 50 of our friends, neighbors are living in those conditions. About 1 in 40 children will experience homelessness this year in the United States, but that number in Orlando is closer to 1 in 17. We have a particularly high rate of homelessness in our community among children, and that is in part because in the state of Florida, about 1 in 7 families live in poverty, but in the Metro Orlando area, that number is 1 in 6. In the Paramore community, where my main office is, that number is closer to 1 in 2 families living in poverty. About 1 in 5 children born at Winnie Palmer Hospital or Advent Hospital for Children are born into poverty, 1 in 5. And then we start talking about poverty, in less abstract terms and more financially. About 1 in 4 wage earners in our community earn under $20,000 a year. About 1 in 3 earn under $25,000 a year. And 1 out of every 2 wage earners in our community earn under $31,186 a year, a little less than $15 an hour. And that $15 an hour rate gets thrown around a lot in discussions about minimum wage. The state of Florida just passed a constitutional amendment that will start really taking effect on September 30th of this year, when our minimum wage will go up to $10 an hour, and then subsequently $1 an hour more each year until it gets to 15. There's been a lot of discussion in federal legislation about the same possibility, although that got dropped in the most recent discussions. But if you have a pen and piece of paper, I would encourage you to follow along, because this next part will be a little bit more difficult to follow along otherwise. And I just want to walk you through just a couple numbers. That first one I just mentioned, $31,186. That's the median income for somebody earning a living in the Metro Orlando area. There are 365 metro areas in the country, in the United States. And a metro area is a fairer comparison than, say, cities, because cities have different boundaries and they're sometimes can be very, very small. In fact, the city of Orlando itself has a population closer to around 250,000 people, but the Metro Orlando area is closer to 2.4 million people. It's the 23rd largest market in the country, and includes Orange County, Seminole County, and Osceola County. So when you think about median, I like to talk about median wage or median income as opposed to minimum wage, because I think the minimum wage conversation tends to sort of suck out of the oxygen out of the room when we talk about what people are really experiencing in our community. So median, for those of you who, it's been a few years since fourth grade math, and it has been for a while for me. If you imagine lining everybody up in our community shoulder to shoulder, and you put the person earning the least amount of income on one end, that would be zero, because there's a lot of people that aren't earning any income, and the person making the most amount of money on the other. And then you pick the person in the middle, that's the median. And in that person in this community, according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, is earning $31,186. That means half of the community is earning less than that, and half is earning more than that. Of the top 100 metropolitan communities in the United States, Orlando is 99th, right above El Paso, Texas, in terms of median income for an individual. Out of the top 50 communities, we are 50th. We are last in that particular area, which is really interesting when you consider that we are the most popular city on the planet. 75 million people came and visited us in 2019. Certainly that was different last year. But to put that in comparison, the second most popular city in the world for tourists to visit was New York, and about 60 million people visited there. And the one that I like to share with everybody, because I always find it really interesting, is the third most popular place for tourists to visit is Paris, France. And about 26 million people visited Paris, France. So about 3 times as many people came to little old Orlando, which wasn't even founded until about 170 years ago. And as opposed to Paris, France, which by some accounts is a city that is over 3,000 years old. So, you know, we have a lot of reason to think that we should be a very flourishing city. We should have a lot of really positive things going on here. And in some ways we do, but in other ways we don't. So if you take, this is where your pen and paper kind of come into mind. If you take that $31,000, you have to think, what does that really mean? And put that into context in some way for some people. There are 5 big areas where people spend money on their daily lives: housing, utilities, transportation, food, and medical care. Now, certainly there's other areas where we spend money, but I want to concentrate on those 5. And if you want to follow along with me, the median amount of money that a Metro Orlando resident would spend on rent or mortgage is $14,658. And if you want to just keep it simple, you can say $14,500. But that's the median amount. So half of our neighbors spend more than that, half spend less than that. In utilities, the median amount to spend on utilities is $1,728. Now, for some of you, that number will sound very low. Some of you, that will sound very high, but that's the point. It's the median number on utilities. And that's just gas, water, and electric. That doesn't include cable or phone. That's just utilities to run and operate your house. In terms of transportation, the median amount spent on transportation in our community is $6,201. And then the median amount spent on food, and these are all just for a single individual person, not a family, is $3,531. And then finally, and one of the larger numbers here is medical care. The median amount spent on medical care is $8,076, or roughly $680 a month. Now, of course, there are certain people who ride the bus and they don't have a car, so they might spend $600 a year because that's what it would cost for an annual bus pass. And certainly there are people who have no healthcare insurance, and so they don't spend any money on healthcare, but there's consequences to that too. But the interesting thing is when you add up all of those expenses, that works out to be $34,194, or the most important number of all, about $3,008 more than the median income. So what happens is we are an out of balance community in many different ways when you consider all of the wealth that comes into the community, but that doesn't necessarily transfer to all of the people in our community. Now, I mentioned, you know, the number of people living in extreme poverty and the number of people living in poverty and the number of people who are homeless. In these types of numbers, I'm talking about half of the community that is struggling to make ends meet. This isn't something that is a small percentage of our friends and neighbors. This is half. So if you look to your left when you go outside, or you look to your right and it's not them, I mean, it's you. And many of you on the call know exactly what I'm talking about, because you struggle to make ends meet as well. And these expenses didn't include a vacation in the #1 vacation destination in the world. They don't include savings. They don't take into consideration taxes. And again, a lot of people have taxes taken out before any of these income numbers. They don't include cell phones, and you really have to have a cell phone in order to exist in our society today. Many of the homeless adults that we work with have cell phones on free cell phone plans, but these cell phone plans really only allow you about 100 minutes a month, which is really not very much when you consider it. And so there's a lot of challenges to living in our society as it relates to the median income. I get a lot of questions about household income, and Orlando is not the lowest household median income. We're third from the bottom. The two communities that are lower than us are Tampa and Miami. So this is a particularly dangerous problem in Florida. Some people will chalk it up to, well, we don't have a state income tax, so we have lower wages, but that doesn't really hold a lot of water when you look at the overall cost of living. So in Orlando, for example, we used to have a relatively low cost of living going back into the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But more recently, in the last 20 years, we index high in a couple of really key areas. Utilities, we're one of the more expensive utility-based communities in the country. We have a very high cost of transportation in our community, partly because of tolls, but it's actually mostly because we're one of the busiest daily population conversion rates in the United States. So more people entering into and leaving the community as a part of their commute than all but two other metro areas, the Washington, D.C. area and the Sacramento, California area. So utilities and transportation index high, and then housing is particularly dangerous for us because we have one of the most unaffordable housing markets anywhere in the United States. In fact, over the period of the last 10 years or so, we've been ranked as the least affordable housing market in the United States. We switched places with Los Angeles on occasion in these rankings. And most recently, a study came out yesterday in the Orlando Sentinel, I think it's in today's paper, that said that the apartments for what we call third-tier apartments or more affordable apartments are at 97% capacity. And there's never been a measure in our community where it was more than 95%. This is the first year where it's been that, which means that there are effectively no available apartments that are affordable for low-income families in our community at all. And I can tell you, if you go on rent.com or apartments.com and you try to search for an available apartment, you'll see what I'm talking about. There's nothing in this community that's available for less than $1,200 a month. There just doesn't exist. So it's really difficult when you're earning, say, $10 or $11 an hour to afford anything, even if you're in a two-income family. And so it's a tricky situation for a lot of people. In my line of business, when we help families in need, a lot of times we talk about the starfish story. This idea that there's the man walking down the beach and he sees another person way off down the beach doing something he can't quite understand what they're doing. As he gets closer, he realizes that they're picking up a starfish and they're throwing it in the ocean because the tide has gone out, and if these starfish don't get back in the water soon, they're all going to die. There's thousands of starfish on the beach. And he gets up to this person, he says, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, I'm trying to save the starfish." He goes, "How could you possibly make a difference? There are thousands and thousands of starfish on the beach." And he throws one back in the ocean. He said, "Well, it makes a difference to this one." And I've kind of been brought up on that starfish story. And I will tell you that as I've worked in this area of nonprofit management and helping people in social services, I more and more learned to hate the starfish story. I think we can do a lot better than helping one person at a time. I think that we as a community, as a society, have a lot more available resources to us than just throwing one starfish back in the ocean at a time. And so I want to read you another story. This is 250 words from a speech that Dr. King gave, the same speech that I started with. And I changed one word in the speech. I changed the word America to Orlando, just to put it into context. And it's the only thing I changed about this speech. And I want you to remember this speech was given in the early 1960s or the mid 1960s, and see how relevant it still is today. So if you'll bear with me. But I'd like to use as a subject from which to speak this afternoon, the other Orlando. And I use this subject because there are literally two Orlandos. One Orlando is beautiful for situation. And in a sense, this Orlando is overflowing with the milk and prosperity and the honey of opportunity. This Orlando is the habitat of millions of people who have food and material necessities for their bodies, and culture and education for their minds, and freedom and human dignity for their spirits. In this Orlando, thousands of people experience every day the opportunity of having life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in all of their dimensions. And in this Orlando, millions of young people grow up in the sunlight of opportunity. But tragically and unfortunately, there is another Orlando. This other Orlando has a daily ugliness about it that constantly transforms the ebulliency of hope into fatigue of despair. In this Orlando, thousands of work-starved men and women walk the streets daily in search for jobs that do not exist. In this Orlando, millions of people find themselves living in rat-infested, vermin-filled slums. And in this Orlando, people are poor by the millions. They find themselves perishing on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. Orlando, in some ways, is not so different than a lot of communities around the United States. We are the most popular tourist destination in the world, but a lot of the same problems that we have in Orlando are similar in New York or in Austin, Texas, or in Los Angeles, California. But there is something that makes Orlando kind of distinct, and I want to share a story with you, and then I'll stop and kind of take some questions, maybe share a little bit about the Christian Service Center. When I was in high school, I grew up in the Tampa Bay area, and when I was in high school, we used to have, like a lot of you, the big school assemblies that were the Just Say No to Drugs assemblies. And they bring, 600 of us into an auditorium, and my school was so big they had to do 3 or 4 of these assemblies. And they would have different people come up on stage and give the whole speech about the dangers of drug use or alcoholism. And in one of these speeches, when I was a sophomore in high school, the most popular guy in school, who was turned out to be the homecoming king, who was drafted, ultimately played in the NFL. He was just a great role model for a lot of people, really good friend to a lot of people. I ran track with him. He was up on stage during this one event at our school. And I learned later that he was not forced to do it, he asked to do it. And he got up in front of all of his friends and all of his colleagues, all of his peers at the school, and he raised his hand really high, and he said, "I'm an alcoholic. I have a problem with beer, because if I drink 1, I'm going to drink 10. And it's a problem that I'm really struggling with. And as part of my recovery, I have been told that the best thing to do is to help others hold me accountable by admitting that I have a problem. And I'm here today to tell you that I have a problem. And I hope that you will hold me accountable, because if not, I'm going to ruin my life. And I want to tell you about some of the experiences I've had when I was really drunk and the bad things that have happened." And he shared that with us. That was tremendously impactful for me as a young student. And even though I've had alcoholism in my family and certainly seen the effects of alcoholism in my job, I will tell you, I don't really drink much at all ever, in part because of the speech that I heard my friend in high school give. It made such a deep impact on me at that time, admitting in front of his peers that he had that problem. I think that Orlando has a unique problem in terms of the barriers to helping people get out of poverty that isn't necessarily just the number of people who've served time in prison or the transportation challenges that we have or the income challenges that we have. Our barrier is largely politics. It's the 6 inches between our ears. And I think the opportunity that Orlando has is to stand up on the world stage as the most popular kid in school, literally, and say, "We've got problems. We want you to watch us as we work to fix them." Our problem as a community is that we want to make every day a Chamber of Commerce day. And we want to make sure that we put on the best possible face for everybody all the time. And I think that that type of attitude is certainly laudable to a degree, that we want to have a best possible face. But when it ignores the problems that we suffer from, we rot from the inside. And that's exactly what's happening as a community. And we have to stand up on the world stage and admit that we have problems. Otherwise, we're never going to be able to dig ourselves out of these holes. And what a great opportunity we have as the most popular community in the world to not only use the resources that come from 75 million people visiting us every single year, but that because 75 million people visit us, we can expose those people to the work that we're doing to help lift the community up. Because you know what? They have problems too. And for anybody, any community, anywhere in the world to think any less of us because we're talking about our problems would simply just be, really disingenuous. Everybody's got these problems. And I think we have an opportunity that we're not taking advantage of. At the Christian Service Center, what we're trying to do is help people one at a time, certainly, but as many of them as we can every single day. And so we are working primarily with homeless adults to get them into a situation where we can get them into housing. Our primary goal is to get people housed, get them employed, and if they're not capable of employment because of a medical condition, get them the medical care that they need. We work to attract people to our facility in downtown Orlando, which is right next to the soccer stadium, by serving meals. We serve right now 17 meals a week. That's almost 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. We're not quite to all 21 meals that you could possibly do, but we're at 17 of them, including today when we'll be serving lunch in about half an hour to roughly about 200 people, a free hot lunch. But we do a breakfast program and a lunch program and a dinner program. We have clothing programs, we have showers, we have laundry services. We do this in partnership with multiple other wonderful nonprofit organizations. And we do this as a means to an end and to help to get people into housing and into jobs and into the mental health or physical health treatment that they need through all the various resources that are available in the community. So we're not an evangelistic organization. We are a service-based organization that is focused on outcomes. We are trying to help get people out of the situation they're in, or as I like to say, get them off the carousel of chaos that they happen to be on right now. The best thing you can do in the community is of course you can do food drives. Of course you can raise money for all the organizations that are doing this. But more important than any of that is you can talk about these issues. Get up on the stage and talk about these things, which I think the people in this group, based on the experiences I've had with you and other congregations, usually are talking about these things. But I encourage you to find some time today to tell one person who isn't part of this congregation today, one thing that you've learned. And I think as we spread the word about the things that we're learning, the closer that we get to finding solutions overall. So with that, I think I wanted to leave any time. I know we're kind of coming up on our time here for the service, but I wanted to see if anybody had any questions. I'm absolutely happy to answer them. But again, just thank you for allowing me the time to speak with you all this morning.
Thank you, Eric. Beth, I think we could take a couple of questions.
Okay. I don't have a full screen here.
Okay, I'll help with that. Joey?
Yes, Mr. Gray, I have a question about, are there any programs, am I frozen?
You're fine, we can hear you.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Are there any programs that are in flux right now that you guys are helping with that is creating housing, in low-income housing, like the Housing First initiative kind of thing, so that you get people into the homes, whether you can find them the help immediately or not, but just get them into a place where they can live and be safe?
Yes, that's a good question. So the Housing First initiative or concept is a theory that we subscribe to as an organization, and most of the social service agencies in our community subscribe to. It's actually a concept that's been around for about 2 decades, but the city of Orlando has really only subscribed to for the last 10 years or so, maybe a little less. And the idea here is that you have to get people into housing first, that we look at housing as healthcare. That there used to be this sort of concept that, well, if we can get them into the shelter and then kind of get them mentally prepared, eventually we'll get them into housing. But really what's been proven time and time again nationally is that you got to get people into housing right away. And then you work on stabilizing them in other means. And so it's actually cheaper for the community to get somebody into an apartment than it is to leave them on the streets or pay for them to be in a shelter. So, if you consider that the studies that have been done show that a single chronically homeless individual in the Orlando area would cost, just based on the cost of the emergency room visits and time spent at the 33rd Street jail, about $35,000 a year. So it's actually less expensive for us to just put them up in an apartment than it would be to leave them out on the streets. And that type of concept is what we've been working for, but it's tough in a community that has very few affordable housing units. So we're not putting people in a lot of congregate housing, so not like a big project housing that you might kind of remember from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. What we're trying to find is individual apartment units that we can put people up in. Now, on occasion, there are hotels that have been purchased by agencies here in this community, not by the Christian Service Center, but by other agencies, and they're trying to retrofit them and turn them into affordable housing complexes. You have multiple public-private partnerships that are doing the same. But I will tell you, Joey, not nearly enough. There are nowhere close to enough of those projects going on right now. There's a lot of momentum towards it, but not nearly enough for us to put everybody up into housing based on what they need. There are roughly about 2,000 people who will sleep on the streets tonight in the Metro Orlando area. There's around 9,000 people who will experience homelessness this year. About 80% of the people who will experience homelessness this year will find a way out of homelessness, either through some government assistance or usually through family assistance or their own personal efforts. But about 20% of that 9,000 will still remain on the street after a year. And those are the folks that we are most concentrated on, about 1,800 to 2,000 people overall that end up being chronically homeless, that have been on the streets for more than 6 months, and usually have some type of mental or physical illness that's a chronic condition that really keeps them from stability. And no, to answer your question, there's not enough housing. Our organization would eventually like to start purchasing housing and being able to put more people up into it. But right now, that's not something we're financially prepared for, but it is part of the long-term goal of the organization.
Thank you.
I think Evelyn has her hand up. Evelyn.
Thank you, Beth. Yes.
And then Laura.
Our church and many, many churches in the area have knocked themselves out to try and make assistance in terms of whatever we all can do to assist people obviously in need, as your service certainly is extraordinary. What you mentioned is the politics of the situation. How do we get a situation where we can keep people informed as to how much their vote counts in terms of every situation and who they are voting for and who is subsidizing the people who are running? This is where serious, serious money is. And instead of having people just be very altruistic, it would be very nice to have a government that's actually doing things to improve, because that's where it really lies.
So it's a great question, and one that I get a lot. And I think there are a lot of efforts going on in the community that I would encourage people to be a part of. And it kind of like the movement towards unions, the idea of collective bargaining can be really powerful. But we're talking about not from our workplace, we're talking about our community. So you have to look at collective opportunities where we can all join together towards some common movement. There are certainly some wonderful organizations that I would encourage people to consider being involved with, like the League of Women Voters, which is one of the best sort of nonpartisan organizations. And I know a lot of you are, because I've seen some of you at the meetings. But the one organization that I would encourage you is not a nonprofit at all. It's a for-profit entity, and that's the Orlando Sentinel. They are the only true journalistic enterprise left in our community. And if the Sentinel dies out, it is going to really hurt the community in a lot of ways. And there's a real sense right now that that's about to happen. Tribune Publishing is trying to sell it to a group called Alden Capital. And they have the Sentinel employees are all working from their homes, not because of the pandemic, but because they sold the building downtown. They are really gutting the resources of the Sentinel in a lot of ways. And, the best thing I think from an investment standpoint that an individual can do in our community is to do the $7.99 per month electronic subscription to get the app on their phone. It's $8 a month that I think is a really important investment, whether you read it or not. But I think it's an important investment, but I would encourage you to read it. You may not agree with some of the commentary of the Sentinel, but at the end of the day, the risk of not having a major journalistic enterprise is so great in this community, it cannot be overstated. The television stations that you watch, these are great journalists, and I have friends that work at the television stations. Most of their journalism comes from the Sentinel. They're getting their stories from the Sentinel originally. Even the WMFE, which is another great journalistic enterprise, one you can donate to. But a lot of their stuff, they're getting their lead from the work that's coming out of the Orlando Sentinel. The Sentinel, unfortunately, is getting a lot of their stories from the Associated Press newswire, and it's a lot of national work, and they need more investment to be able to do more local work. So to me, I think that is the most significant. And if I had, a couple of dozen $1 million to do anything within the community right now, that's what I would do, is I would buy the Sentinel.
I totally agree. And I have watched the Sentinel go from, let's say, extremely leaning right towards much more left over the past 25 years. However, what I've also heard from people who are more affluent in the community is, oh, well, it's just going too far, and so we don't want to bother. So the combination of also having other networks available as opposed to a newspaper these days, and listening to, oh, well, they've just gone too far, really gets a bit depressing.
Yeah. Thank you. Laura, do you mind waiting till after we close the service? I believe Eric said he would stay on a few minutes afterwards, and we can continue this after we close the service for people that need to leave for RE. So let's take a brief break and back to Beth, and then we'll go back to Eric. Thank you.
All right. We'll extinguish the flame. Please join with me. As we extinguish the flame, please think about all that we have heard today, and we've heard quite a bit. Now we have
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Thank you. All right. Now we'll listen to All for All That Is Our Life, written by Patrick, Ricky, performed by Jess. My closing words today are from someone I greatly admire and do love, Michelle Obama. Don't ever underestimate the importance you have, because history has shown us that courage can be contagious and hope can take on a life of its own. Thank you, and have a wonderful week.
Amen to that.